Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Kidlit Social. I'm Laura Backus, and tonight marks our second anniversary of the Kidlit Social, as you can see on your screen. And I'm really excited about that. It has been a really, really fun 2 years, and I'll talk a little more about the last 2 years in a few minutes. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you to those of you who are watching on the replay. So for those of you who are brand new to us, if you want to get on our list and know about everything we're doing, including upcoming social guests, and I have some really great people booked in April and May. So I'm really excited about that. Anyway, go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet and you can get on our list, and you'll also get a free ebook. That should say, well, as of next month, it's 32 years of children's writing knowledge, because that's how long we will have been publishing Children's Book Insider. As of May, it will be 32 years. And I'm guessing there are some people listening to this who are maybe 32 years old. So there you go. But anyway, it compiles our best beginner knowledge in one ebook, and that's yours for free for getting on our list. So go check that out. And if you're curious about what is this Children's Book Insider, you can get a special offer to our socialites. That's what we call you, $5 a month. writeforkids.org/CBI, the link on the bottom of your screen there. You will get, it's an e-newsletter. Didn't start out that way 32 years ago, but now it is. It's about anywhere from 20 to 25 pages a month. This month happens to be 25 pages, delivered to your inbox once a month. And you get all sorts of great stuff in it, including one special submission opportunity to either an editor or an agent, where they open up their submission opportunity just to our CBI subscribers for a month. So that's really cool. And we've got some great people coming up for that too. You don't want to miss that. Plus lots of great articles, interviews, other market opportunities. So please go check that out. And you get full access to our membership site called the CBI Clubhouse, which has lots of information from the last 30, almost 32 years on it. Very cool. Okay, so when we first started this social 2 years ago, when it was called the Kidlit Distancing Social, because it was during the beginning of the pandemic we started it, I had some features that I don't do anymore because I realized it was making the social go longer than an hour, and I wanted to keep it to an hour every time. One of the things that we did was called Where in the World is Laura? And I put up a literary landmark and you had to guess where it was. So we're going to do that again tonight, because a little throwback to our first, I don't know, 6 months or so of the social when I did this. So this is actually, I'm going to give you some clues to this one. So I'm going to tell you what this is. Okay, it's the Cathedral of St. John of the Divine in New York City. Beautiful, beautiful cathedral on the Upper West Side. And it was named a literary landmark in 2012 because of its connection to an iconic middle grade and young adult author. So tell me in the chat box who you, Sheila, you got it immediately. Good for you. Yes, Madeleine L'Engle. So this was dedicated a literary landmark in honor of Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote all these wonderful books, among others. She served as the church's librarian for more than 40 years. Oh, Sheila, you live in the neighborhood. Lucky you. So you knew all about this. I love that neighborhood. And the dedication took place on November 9th, 2012, which would have been her 94th birthday. So I think that's really cool. I did not know she was the church's librarian until I started looking up literary landmarks. So I learned something tonight. But that is very, very cool. So Sheila, you win a prize. We'll figure out what that might be, besides bragging rights. Okay, now we do celebrate. Probably my favorite section of every social. And this is where we celebrate your accomplishments for all stages of your journey. So I've got some great ones tonight. Kathleen Barr writes, "This is a blast from the past. I'd like to thank you for your help with my picture book manuscript, Alien Zucchini from Outer Space. Last year I rewrote it as a magazine story, and yesterday Highlights bought it. Woohoo! What a surprise. I learned a lot from you in those first few years of writing." Well, thank you, Kathleen. I'm so glad that you did not let that manuscript go and you kept working on it. And that is great proof that sometimes a story works, but maybe you're targeting the wrong market with it. Maybe it was a magazine story instead of a picture book. So good for you, Kathleen. That's awesome. B. Brown writes, gosh, I should have proofread this slide. I apologize. Last spring, I wrote a historical fictional narrative for the Augusta Museum of History in Augusta, Georgia, Conquering the Counter, based on paying college students who took part in the H.L. Green's lunch counter sit-in 1960. Is presented live each third Saturday as part of the museum's Voices of the Past series. That's really cool, B. I love that. So it sounds like this is sort of a play you wrote that is performed each third Saturday. That is awesome. So thank you for sharing that with us. And if anybody's in Augusta, Georgia, go check that out. Sheila Lewis, our winner tonight, writes, "After delays, working on other people's writing, and my perfectionism, etc., I finally pressed send on an Above the Slush Pile submission." Woo, woo. That's the special submission opportunities in our newsletter. It felt good. I bet it did. Another win was being asked to submit a story to a woman's literary magazine based on an in-person conversation about children's writing. You never know where or when our words will land. Thanks, CBI, for continued support and excellence. Well, thank you, Sheila, and thank you for sharing that with us. And we want you to be sure to tell us if any of those submissions end up with a sale. Good for you for doing those 2 submissions. And finally, Bruce Glass says, "After many delays, Jumping Jim has finally been released as of March. Jumping Jim is a picture book written in rhyme about a toddler who likes to jump nearly everywhere he goes. It's a fast-paced story that takes Jim and his mother around town and back home. Jumping Jim is available through Amazon." Congratulations, Bruce. That's awesome. I love to hear about books that finally see the light of day after many delays, because that's perseverance right there. So congratulations to everyone. And I want to hear your good news. So email me, mail@writeforkids.org, and put "celebrate" in the subject line, and we will feature your news on a future Kidlit social. And as you can see, we celebrate everything here. Does not just have to be a publication. So every step in your journey is important, and we want to be there to celebrate with you. And link of interest, this social, this is really cool. So Newbery Award-winning author Kate DiCamillo was interviewed on the podcast On Being with Krista Tippett. And the interview was titled "For the 8-Year-Old in You." And it's wonderful. And you can read the transcript or listen to the interview at this link I have. I created a bit.ly link out of it, bit.ly/Kate DiCamillo interview. And remember, when we send out the replay to this social, we'll put all these links under the replay. So if you forget it or don't write it down, you'll get it tomorrow. But this is really worth either listening to or reading. Kate is just one of the most talented authors I have ever read. And her ability to live in the world of her readers is extraordinary. And she talks a little bit about that in this interview. So do not miss that. Okay. So let's see. So here we go. 2nd anniversary of the Kidlit Social. So before I get into your questions, I just wanted to say a few words about having done this for 2 years. I thought about, and John even said to me, "Oh, you should do a little best of reel and show, I was like, well, first of all, I'd have to go back and rewatch 2 years worth of socials. to find the best of little clips here and there. But also, I don't know if I can pick a best of, you know, I cannot think of one interview that has not been amazing. I've learned something on every one of them. I've gotten to meet people who I met for the first time on the social. I've just I love how talented and enthusiastic and passionate and generous all my guests have been. And I don't think I could pick a favorite. I've every single one has great value. And what I want you all to realize is that you can see all of the replays from the very first one at writeforkids.org. And if you go to that website, our website, along the top, there's a little bar with different tabs. There's one called the Kidlit Social. Click on that. All the replays are there. And I guarantee a lot of your questions that you asked tonight, I'm going to say, we did a social on that. And so to get more information, go watch the replay. Also, these are not going to be up forever because they're taking up an awful lot of space on our website. And at some point, we're going to have to start pulling them down. So if there's anything you really want to watch, go watch it now. That is my message to you tonight. And also, please tell your friends about it. We want to keep this going. It's way fun if there's a lot of people here. I want my guests to have a wide audience. And I know a lot of you watched on the replay and we really appreciate that. But please share. Please tell your friends when you get the announcement from us, share it on your social media. It's the first and third Tuesday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's always free. And the link to join is always bit.ly/kidlit-social. So you can bookmark that link if you forget it, if you don't see our email, whatever. Mark it on your calendar, click that link, show up, and you'll always be able to participate in the social. So that's my request to you. And thank you all. There's some of you who have been here since the beginning, and I so appreciate you showing up every week and being loyal socialites. It means a lot to us. So now we get to your questions. Let's see. Oh, there's quite a few questions already. Okay. So Shirley asks, what is the process for submitting magazine stories? Same as for a book proposal. Well, for it, fiction, nonfiction, two different beasts for magazines. For fiction, again, you're going to go to the magazine's website, click on submission guidelines, just as you would book publisher. And magazines are actually pretty good about putting their submission guidelines on their website because they need a lot more submissions than book publishers do to keep going. And for fiction, generally you're submitting the whole manuscript and they will give you a word limit, and you want to make sure you stay within that word limit. If you go over, it's going to be a rejection because magazines have a finite amount of space that they need to fit the stories in. So really pay attention to that. For nonfiction, a lot of the more like the cobblestone magazines that are distributed a lot in schools, like Faces. I'm blanking now on the other ones, but they're the history magazines and the world culture magazines from Cobblestone. There's a whole bunch of them. Anyway, they have a very specific format on what they want as a proposal for a nonfiction article. So yes, then it's more of a proposal, and you're just follow their format. You're summarizing what you want to talk about. You're explaining the resources you're going to use, any experts that you plan on contacting, how long you think the piece will be, the slant you're going to take, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really well spelled out in their guidelines. So just follow that and good luck. And a lot of magazines have theme lists. So you want to make sure that whatever you're submitting ties in with an upcoming theme. Not all magazines, but a lot of them, especially the nonfiction ones. So just make sure you adhere to that as well. Okay. La, 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 la. Okay, Barbara says, I'm going to query agents about a picture book since I'm looking for an agent who can represent me for other genres. Is it okay to mention that I'm writing a YA historical novel in the query? Yes, agents like to know sort of who you are as an author, not just this one manuscript. So you're going to submit, your main query is going to be whatever manuscript you feel is done and ready to be seen by an agent. But in your bio section, you can talk a little bit about who you are, and then you can say other things that you're currently working on. You don't have to give a big explanation, but you can, just say the type of story it is and maybe a little one sentence description if if you're that far along that you can write that, because they do want to know sort of who you are as an author. So good luck with that, Barbara. Melissa Stuyvesant, hello. If you have the pitch, comps, etc. for a picture book and want to turn it into a series, how would you change the pitch to encompass the entire series? Especially since the other books aren't written yet. Okay, so I assume that you are not doing this on a Twitter pitch, because that's a different beast, as you know, and you only have, what is it, 240 characters, so it's hard to get all of that into a Twitter pitch. But if you're doing it a regular query letter submission kind of thing, I would start with, if it's something that you envision as a series, then really your pitch is for a series. So the main part of the pitch is going to be about the series. What is the hook that holds the books together? Is it about a character? Like, I don't know. Here's the tricky thing about picture book series that are fiction. I'm assuming you're talking fiction, Melissa. I might be wrong. Most fiction picture book series grow organically. They don't start as a series. They start as one book that catches on, and then the editor says, hey, add some more with this character, like the Olivia books by Ian Falconer, for example. Those started as one character. Even the Pigeon books, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, that was one book. It wasn't conceived as a series, but the characters get so popular that readers want more and more. So if you are envisioning a fiction series, you really need to prove that this character can live for more than one book. If it's a nonfiction series, that's a different thing. Then you're going to have some sort of overarching idea or concept that's going to hold the series together. Either way, that's the bulk of your pitch, is going to be proving that this can be a series. And then I would give a brief synopsis of the first book that you have ready. And if the query says you can submit an entire manuscript with the query, then you're going to submit the manuscript for the first book. But you also want to have at least titles ready for, I would say, most series are anywhere from 3 to 5 or more books, but publishers aren't going to commit to more than 5. So I would say have at least 4 more title ideas that you can say, these are other books in the series, so that the editor can start envisioning sort of how this would all be more than one book. So I hope that helps. So you're really focusing on the series in your pitch and selling that idea, and then giving the synopsis for the first book. Okay. Marcia asks, do I know anything about Writer's Digest second draft? Do they give a good edit? I don't know much about them. That's an editing service. And I don't even think I know anybody who's used them. So I can't give you any information on that. If anybody has used Writer's Digest second draft and you want to say something in the chat box, please do. Make sure your chat is set to everyone instead of hosts and panelists so that everyone can see it. Yeah, let us know what you think. If you are a CBI subscriber, I have some recommended critique services. In the CBI Clubhouse, there's a little tab at the top called Grab Your Member Perks, Grab Your Insider Perks. I can't remember which one it's called. If you click on that, one of the categories is some recommended critique services that we personally know and can recommend. Okay. And it looks like some people have used Writer's Digest Second Draft and liked it. So great. Okay. Jody says, I'm in Canada. When submitting to US publishers, should I change my Canadian spelling to American? No, they can figure it out. We're able to cross border that much with our reading. And they're going to know immediately, you know, whenever I get an email from someone and they spell color with U, I know they're either in Canada or the UK. It's no big deal. And if an editor, you know, wants to change that, they can handle that. So I would not worry about that. And good luck. PJ says, on Twitter, there's been agents saying that querying is tougher than ever. Not enough new agents and editors quitting. Any advice on how to make queries stand out from the pack? That's a really good question, PJ. Yes, we're reading a lot of articles right now in industry publications about mid-level editors getting frustrated and quitting because they're not able to. Publishing has this very entrenched hierarchy and system, and that's another conversation. But I think from what I've been hearing from agents is what really makes them sit up and take notice is if you've got that one line hook at the beginning of your query that has a real commercial appeal to it, so that they immediately know how your manuscript is going to stand out, and they can immediately see that there's an audience for it, bigger than a small regional audience. Unless you're querying a regional publisher, then obviously. But I think that's really the key, is that hook. And also I'm hearing more and more about needing that emotional core to everything, even nonfiction. So in your synopsis, in your idea, you know, there has to have that emotional resonance with the reader. They have to be able to identify it. They have to feel that you are speaking to them on some level, you know, not as a grown-up speaking down to a kid, but speaking to the reader as equals and saying, I see you, I get you. And then that commercial hook. It is, I mean, that's unfortunately just a reality of the business. And especially these days, there's a lot of books out there, and everybody is clamoring for shelf space and to be noticed. And publishers need to know that the books that they publish are going to make a profit. And having a decent size audience commercial appeal is important. Now, that doesn't mean your book should appeal to everyone. I think the best commercial appeal is being able to appeal to a easily identifiable audience. That's why, like, when editors say, and not in the kids arena, but in adult fiction, they say chick lit. That's an identifiable audience. It's women of a certain age who are in book clubs, who buy books and talk about them. I mean, this is a very specific demographic that chick lit goes for. So what you want to do is really think about who is the demographic of your book. And if it's just a general fiction, that's not a demographic, okay? If it's kids who love science and love to explore outer space and like to build things, you know, that's a much more specific demographic. You can really figure out how to market that. You could say, okay, this is going to be used in schools, maybe in the maker stations in schools or in STEM classes or whatever. So I think I'm sort of talking in circles here because I'm doing this off the top of my head. Sorry, PJ, you gave me a big question here. But so really to sum up, two things, commercial appeal, but also a very identifiable audience. Who is your reader? And if you can show that in your query letter, I think that that is uh, very, very useful to the agent. And that's why they ask for comp titles, because they want to know that there is an audience out there. And if you could say it's the same kind of kids who read this, they'll go, okay, there's an audience already. But that gets tricky too. You don't want to be exactly like someone else who's out there. There was an article that I pulled up that I haven't completely read yet, but I'm going to put the link in. Let's see if I can find it here. No, it's in another folder. I'll find it. It's about how to use Google searches to figure out what your potential audience is also reading and where they're on, what sites they're on. Now, this is a little harder with children's book authors because a lot of our audience are kids and they're probably not Googling, or they shouldn't be. But let me see if I can find this real quick, and I will put the link in the chat box. Nope, that's not the folder I want. And we'll also have this in the replay, under the replay. It's pulling up on my, oh, it's in my Dropbox. Hang on. Let's see. Oh, this, okay, sorry. I can't share this because it's from a subscription newsletter. Okay. I'm going to put in the chat box where I got this from, and you all are going to have to go. So Jane Friedman, who is an amazing, she has an amazing blog. She's an industry pro. She's been around forever, and she's really good at the business side of publishing. She has a subscription newsletter called The Hot Sheet that comes out twice a month. And she had this great article called Find Your Readers for Free. And it's about how to use search engines and other things on Google to figure out, you put in certain keywords and you find where your readers are and what and other things they're interested in. And you can get 2 issues of the Hot Sheet for free if you want to check it out. So I'm going to just put in the chat box Hot Sheet, and it's at janefriedman.com, and you should go check it out. You can, totally suggest subscribing. I think it's like $25 a month. It's not super expensive, but the article that you want to look for if you get your free issue is called Find Your Readers for Free, and it was from the March 30th issue. So I'm just going to put from March 30th issue. Okay, so that's in the chat box. So go check that out. But that's a really good way to kind of figure out if your idea has some commercial appeal, or how to show the agent that there is a market for this idea. So check that out too. So PJ, that was a very long answer to your very direct question. I hope it helped. Okay. All right, Janelle. I would categorize some of my picture books as storybook picture books, longer text and illustrations. Should I specify this when approaching editors and or publishers? Yeah, the storybook category is something, when I started in publishing back in the mid 80s, that was a specific category. It was longer picture books. They had a lot more text. Often they only had like a full page illustration, maybe every second or third page, and then it was a lot of text. We don't really have that category anymore. So what I would do, Janelle, is instead of calling it a storybook, I would see if you can find some comp titles that are fairly recent, I would say published in the last 5 to 8 years, that have that same format, and say it is a picture book geared toward older readers, like, and then mention 2 or 3 other books that have that same longer format. I think picture books are starting to move a little bit longer again. We went real short for a while, but now because the market is broadening, they're realizing that older kids still like picture books in a lot of times, and so they are sort of expanding that age group. So, but I wouldn't call it a storybook because that's a category that either editors, younger editors aren't going to know what it is, or older editors are going to go, oh, we don't do that anymore. But I would find a couple comp titles if you can, and just call it a picture book for older readers. And then give an age designation. Maybe it's kids 7 to 10, or, I assume it's a fiction. But give those examples so that they know that there is a market for that. Okay, good luck. How and where do you get permission to use song snippets in books? Okay, so that you would have to contact whoever owns the copyright of the song, and it's probably the record company. Now, if you said excerpts from books, I could answer that. Publishers have a department called permissions, and usually if you go to the publisher's website, and it says contact, or contact us, there's usually a link somewhere on there, or in their frequently asked questions, where they'll say, if you want to reprint an excerpt from one of our books, contact the rights and permissions department here, and there's a link. And basically you need to write them and tell them exactly how you're going to use it, show them the excerpt. If it's within a certain word count and you're using it a certain way, they'll often let you do it for free, as long as you have attribution. Sometimes you have to pay a little bit. I assume that snippets work the same way. So I would contact the record company and go on their website and see if you can find the rights and permissions department, and contact them. Okay. Patricia, I write historical fiction, picture books, and chapter books. I'm trying to look for an agent or publishing house that would want that genre. Any suggestions on how to narrow down the field and find an agent? Okay, well, historical fiction, that's easy. That's a very specific genre. There's a lot of great places you could search. Manuscript Wish List is a wonderful site that you can go on and you can type in some keywords and search agents and editors that way. I'm going to put this in the chat box here. And just Google manuscript wish list, and they also have a Twitter feed, but start with the website. And then also Query Tracker. Yeah, is it Query Tracker or agentquery.com? Why am I blanking? I think it's Query Tracker. Sorry, I'm gonna just Google it really quick. I told you I had a long day. Yes, Query Tracker. Querytracker.net. I'm glad I checked that because I was going to say .com. Querytracker.net is a place where you can go look for agents. And basically you can type in some keywords, children's historical fiction, blah, 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 and it'll pull up a list of agents who represent that kind of thing. There are a lot of newsletters, etc. Obviously, Children's Book Insider, but that I'm trying to think of some of them I subscribe to. I told you I had a long day. Authorspublish.com is one. What is it called? Publishing Insanity, maybe? It has a funny name. That basically collect market information and send it out. Now, most of it's for the adult market, but every once in a while, you get a great hit. let me just make sure that publishing and other forms of insanity. There you go. That's a site that it's a newsletter you can subscribe to, and the publisher there just collects market information. Again, most of it's for adult market, but sometimes the agents often represent children's books. So those are some places to start. Manuscript Wishlist and Query Tracker would be my two big ones that you should start with for sure. Okay. And again, just type in those keywords: historical fiction, picture books, chapter books, and you'll come up with some stuff. Okay. Sue, this is a great question. How do I choose whether to publish my first preschool age story as a book or in a magazine? So it depends a lot on how it's written. So magazine stories tend to have fewer scene changes than a picture book. They take place over a shorter period of time because usually there's only going to be maybe 2 or 3 illustrations for the whole story in a magazine, whereas a picture book is told in a series of scenes, and every time you turn the page there's another scene, and it's very action-based, and the scenes need to be illustrated, and there's often a subtext that comes out in just the illustrations, so that there's things happening that the child is looking at while the adult or the older child is reading the words out loud. Whereas a magazine story, the illustrations pretty much depict exactly what's in the text. So you have to kind of analyze your story and know whether it, there's Rosie, whether it has enough scene changes and the right kind of pacing to have those page turns that you would have in a book. And so what I would do is really just get some magazines that have the fiction for that age group, get some young picture books, and just read that side by side and really try to start analyzing the difference. And that'll give you an idea as to whether your story is better suited for one or the other. Don't make the mistake of thinking, well, I can submit it to a magazine and then I'll submit it to a publisher later. Most of the time, publishers won't take it if it's already been published in a magazine. And a lot of magazines buy all rights anyway. So if you want to submit it to a magazine, know that this is going to be a magazine story. Okay. Cheryl says, if I live in the US, is it wise to submit to literary agents in Australia, UK, Canada, etc., or those just in the US? You know, it really depends on the agent. Some agents prefer, like in Canada or Australia, prefer to take clients just from their country, you know. So you'd really have to go, there goes Rosie, go on the agent's website, kind of study who they are, look at the other books that they represent, look at the publishers they sell to. Most agents are going to sell primarily to publishers in their country because that's who they know, and then they have agents outside of their that they sort of subcontract with to sell the rights to other countries. But you're going to give away a bigger commission for that because you've got 2 agents now instead of 1. So it kind of depends on where you want your sales to be. I would start with US agents if you live in the US and see how you do there. And then, you know, go from there. Okay. Sorry, Rosie. Oh, Cheryl is asking me cost ranges for an illustrator if self-publishing a picture book, and also how much it costs to self-publish a picture book. So good questions, and it's not an easy answer because it depends so much on the type of illustrations, whether you're doing hardcover or paperback, if they're going to be all color, if there's going to be some black and white, how many pages there are. There's a lot of variation in there. And how detailed the illustrations are. So I wish I had a really, really easy answer for you. However, my guest at the next social on the 19th is a self-publishing expert. And that is a really good question to ask her because she coaches authors through the self-publishing process. And she herself has self-published several picture books. So instead of me just throwing out some random numbers here, I think you should come back to the Kidlit social on April 19th and ask that question again, and we'll have a much more intelligent answer for you. Okay. How's that for passing the buck? Sapphire says, I have a manuscript that does not really have a main character. There's a smell in the house and the family member engage in trying to find the source, much like who farted. But there's no identifiable main character. Is that acceptable? Well, yes, it can be if you write it properly. So, there has to be a reason to keep the pages turning. And I think if you can do that in a funny way, in a way that engages the reader, in a way that opens up the way for an illustrator to get really creative and fun, and then there's got to be a payoff at the end. So it can't just be like, well, you don't know what happened. Then yes, I think you absolutely could do that. And in a way, it could be like a guessing game, especially if the illustrator can put little clues throughout the illustrations and the child is sort of gathering information as they go through the book and can try to guess what happened at the end. I think that could be really fun. So that's kind of your hook. I mean, if you write it that way and you're querying an agent or an editor, it's sort of a whodunit picture book where, the perpetrator is just off screen or just outside the page, and the reader has to gather the clues to figure out who farted. I think that could be a great book. I don't know if that's exactly what you plan, Sapphire, but I think that's how you should write it. Okay. Latina, I'd like to try outlining my book before I begin writing. Is there a template that you could suggest? Oh, Latina, I'm so glad you asked this question because we have a webinar coming up at the end of April on outlines, April 27th. And so on the next social, I'll have more details, but our instructor is an outline queen, and she's going to give you like 8 different outlines formats that you can choose from and talk about the pros and cons of each and what works for different kinds of stories. So please come to that webinar, because I'm sure there are templates out there. I just don't know them off the top of my head. I know you will have some if you come to this webinar. She will provide them to you. So please check that out. And again, the next social will have more detail. And if you're on our list, you'll get information about that too. On outlines, April 27th. I think it's a Tuesday. La 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 la. Oh, yes, Bruce's book is Someone Farted. Okay. I'm sorry. What should guide my decision to write my picture book in present tense or past tense? Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you really need to try it both ways. I really do, because it's a picture book, it's not going to take you, 3 months to write it 2 different ways. Write it one way first, get the story down the way you want it to be, and then change the tense and side by side, see how it works. It depends on the story. It depends on, present tense is much more immediate. You can't really jump forward in time in present tense the way you can in past tense, because everything's happening right now. Your character's going through it right now, and your character can't be here and then be a week ahead in present tense. So there's little things like that will maybe sway you one way or the other, but I think you really need to write it both ways and read it out loud, or have someone read it out loud to you, or take it to your critique group, because really it's going to affect the pacing, it's going to affect the tension, it's going to affect the way your character, the way your reader relates to the character. And those are only decisions you can make as to whether which one's most effective. So I would try them both. La, 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 la. Are you able to start a story with the antagonist? Marcia says, absolutely. Especially novels. I see this a lot in like mysteries where we actually see the crime being committed. We don't know who's doing it, but we're sort of in the criminal's head or the antagonist's head, and then the next chapter we're into the protagonist's head and or point of view, and we see how that person eventually starts trying to solve the crime. So you can. It's hard for me to give a definitive answer without knowing the age group and sort of the details of your story. Generally, in your story's opening, in your first chapter, you're really establishing a relationship with the protagonist and your main character, and you're getting your reader connected to that main character because they're going to follow that character through the story. And so if you're starting with the antagonist, is this going to be your main character? You could make the antagonist the main character of your book. Or is there a reason? There has to be a really good reason that you're starting with the antagonist and then switching to the protagonist. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying that you should have a good reason for it, because you will put a little bit of distance between your reader and your protagonist in that first chapter if you start with the antagonist. But sometimes it's an interesting device to build some sympathy for the antagonist up front. And then you bring in the protagonist. So again, you can do these sort of things with middle grade and YA. I think if you're in chapter book, easy readers, and certainly picture books, it gets trickier. I don't think I would start with the antagonist in a picture book, but I'm sure there's books that have done that successfully. I just can't think of one off the top of my head. So that is not a really straightforward answer to you, Marcia, but often writing is not straightforward. Okay. Charlotte, I have a story a friend asked me to rewrite for her. I put it away. She passed several years ago. I recently found the story and wanted to know if I could send it to someone. It is a sweet story. I had this happen to me actually. And I would first of all contact the friend's family and ask their permission if it's okay for you to do that. If you did rewrite it, ask the family if you can have co-author credit with your friend. I would certainly have her name on it somehow. But as long as you get permission from the family, and they might really want you to do that because they would love to see the story out there. So I think it's fine, but I would definitely ask the permission first. And in the query letter or submission to editor or agent, explain that so that they understand who this co-author is and that you have permission from the family, etc. So yes, I think you absolutely can with the right permission. And it's a lovely thing to do for your friend as well. Okay. Susan says, I've written a devotional for middle school kids. The youth pastor really likes it and is planning to use it with his kids soon. Can I use this as a pilot project and then report to an agent, or is there some sort of dollar issue for it? I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a dollar issue. I think that you can certainly, if this pastor's using it and you can get feedback, you can get quotes from the pastor, the kids, Sunday school teachers, whoever are using this, and use it as part of your proposal maybe to a publisher and say, I tested it with these classes at this church or this school, and it was just sort of my testing ground. It went over really well. I think it would do well with a broader audience. Here's the response I got. I think that's fine. Absolutely. Where it's considered sort of previously published is if you actually self-publish it, put it out there for sale on Amazon or somewhere else, and then go to a publisher and say, I would like you to publish it. They'll say, well, it's already been published. But something like this, that someone's just using in a classroom, I don't think that's a problem. So that's how I would do it. And then use their feedback to improve it, to revise it, get a quote from the pastor if it worked really well, to add to your query to a publisher. And those of you who are asking several questions, I'm going to have to skip around because I have a ton of questions here, and I'd really like to get to as many as possible. But I don't think I can be here all night. So, oh, Vicky says April 27th is a Wednesday. Do you mean the 26th? I do mean the 26th. That's right. It's the Tuesday for the outline webinar. Thank you. And Christina said the same thing. Thank you for catching that. Okay. And you'll get the correct information from us a little farther down, a little farther in the month. Okay. La 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 la. Anonymous. When writing about a licensed character in an unlicensed book, to what extent can an author rely on fair use for illustrations? Should the author ask the license holder? I would always ask the license holder to be really, really clear, unless the work is in public domain. Now, we did a Kidlit social with, see if I can find it, the one we did, Mary Flower, who is a publishing attorney, and she has been working in publishing as an attorney for decades. She used to write a column for me like way back when we started the newsletter. And I did a social with her, and we asked a lot of questions about copyright. So I want you to go to that replay link that I gave you at the beginning of this social. Kidlit Distancing Social number 41. Publishing attorney Mary Flower answers your questions on copyright, contracts, and more. So the really important thing that I had her go over was, how do you know if something is public domain? And she really explained that, because the public domain laws changed in, I think it was 76. So stuff published before then has a different rule than stuff published after then. And she explained it. If it's not in public domain, I would contact the license holder. It's always, even if it falls under fair use, you want to cover your butt, so to speak. You don't want someone coming after you, especially if they have a licensed character and it's a company that has some money behind them. But you want to explain really carefully how you want to use this, and just get their permission in writing. Okay. All right. Diane says, in middle grade fantasy novel with two point of views, a main character and a second main character, does it have to end with the main character who started the story, or can it end with the second one? I think it can end with the second one. I mean, you're sort of alternating viewpoints, I assume, so it just depends how the plot wraps up. And often books with two viewpoints, you might be sort of telling two separate stories with these two characters, and then they somehow come together. That might be the way you're doing it. And so their story's going to wrap up together, but whose ever viewpoint you're telling that ending in, it's just however it works best for your story. There's no hard and fast rule. So I think that's fine. And two point of views in middle grade and YA happens all the time, and it can be very effective. You just want to make sure it's really clear to the reader whose viewpoint you're in. So you might alternate by chapters, or have very, very distinct voices for each of the characters. You need to figure that out in your writing. I'm sure you're already thinking about that stuff. Okay. Oh, someone asked us, did you have to have permission for the quotes in Board Books 101 in the April CBI? So yes, the article that Johnny Ray Moore wrote us for how to write board books. So that falls under fair use because we did it in a review sense. And when you're quoting a short bit from, and it's usually under 100 words, in the sense of a board book, it would be under about 30 words or so because it's just a couple pages. But when it's in a sense of reviewing the book or an educational sense, it's fair use. And so they're great examples of board books, and here's what you learn from them. So it was both a review and an educational sense. So in that case, you can do it. So if you're writing an article, say for another publication, and you're doing a short excerpt, or if it's an analysis of some sort, you can have, and it's usually under 100 words. But in the case of, say, a picture book or a board book, 100 words might be a huge chunk of the book. So you want to have a much smaller percentage of the story. So thank you for asking that. Okay. Susan says, I'm working in a critique group and none of us are author illustrators. I have always heard the writing should carry the implied visuals, but I've also noticed the illustration notes really help to enrich the story. For a 500-word picture book, how many illustration notes are too many? That depends very much on the editor you're sending it to, because a lot of editors say, put as many in as you want. I'm going to take them out before I send it to the illustrator. I always say only put an illustration note in if something has to happen in an illustration for the plot to make sense, but there's no way the illustrator could know that from the text. If you are putting in notes about an implied subplot that could happen in the illustrations that has nothing to do, that is not in the text, but that you would love the illustrator to add, no, you can't do that. That's up to them. And they might come up with a different subplot that's even better. So it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, if you feel you really have to add one or two, go ahead and do it, knowing that the editor might take it out. I wouldn't do more than two. A 500-word picture book, no, no, no. So what's interesting, and it depends a lot on the stories, but what I would do is, if you have books that you love, picture books that were written and illustrated by different people, take the text and type it out and just read the text. And really see for yourself, try to be as objective as possible and say, would illustration notes be necessary? Or is there enough possibility of illustrations that the author didn't need them? That's what you want, is the possibility. Because if you're not an illustrator, you're not even imagining all the possibilities out there. Our brains just don't work that way if we're not illustrators. So you don't want to limit the possibilities by giving them notes. So I was really surprised, one of the authors who did a webinar for us, Pat Zietlow Miller, see if I can find one of her books quickly. On my shelf. She's written she's New York Times bestselling author. She did a webinar for us, which is on our Writing Blueprint site, about how to add emotional impact to your picture books. And a lot of her books are not really plot based. And I always assumed that she gave illustrator notes because the illustrator always adds this wonderful plot to the words. She's like, no, I never do. They figure it out. So go read some of her stuff and just type out her, oops, you know what? I never sent this. Sorry. Manuscript wish list and querytracker.net. It's now in the chat box. And Pat, is it Z-E-I-T-L-O-W or Z-I-E-T-L-O-W? I always forget. Is a wonderful author, and go check out her books and type those out and see how they have possibility of illustration but she never uses illustration notes when she submits. So I don't know if that helps, but it's a hard one for authors to kind of get comfortable with. I know it really is. I get it, but it'll get easier. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, so Christina, yeah, I know you can't save the chat box at present. Again, we'll put all the links that I'm putting in the chat box. We'll put them in with the replay when it goes out tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think in webinar format that you can save the chat box, but I can. So we'll make sure that it goes out with the replay. Hi, Terry. Oh my goodness, Terry. Sorry I didn't get to your question before you left. But I'll ask her question and hopefully she'll watch on replay. She says, I have 3 narrators in my middle grade. One of my fellow critique members rewrote my synopsis to simplify it. Isn't it better to have all 3 narrators mentioned? I think so. If you're going to have 3 narrators, so 3 viewpoints in your middle grade, I think you can have a basic synopsis of the story in your first paragraph or in a few sentences. And then I would say a sentence at the end of the synopsis. This story is told in alternating viewpoints between character, and a little description. So-and-so, the oldest child of the family, so-and-so, the youngest sibling, and so-and-so, the cousin, or whoever the characters are, so that it's clear to the editor that you're going to have these 3 viewpoints. But you don't necessarily have to go into great detail about each character in the synopsis. You want to get sort of the plot down in the synopsis. I hope that makes sense, Tara. Kathy asks, could you define commercial hook? Okay, so commercial hook is, it's, everybody defines hook a little differently. So a hook is something that your story has that you can sum up in one sentence, sort of the main sort of gist of your story and what makes it stand out. And a lot of times, and movies are a great example. Go look at movie posters, go look at and see the hooks, because in movies they have to have that hook right up front. Sometimes it's in the title. The movie Snakes on a Plane. That's the hook. It's snakes and they're on a plane. That's all you need to know to get the concept of the movie. Okay. Sharknado is another one. Okay, so that's the hook. Sometimes a book like Harry Potter had a hook. It was a boy wizard who was, oh god, now I'm blanking. Discovering who he is and defeating the evil warlord. If you think about like most books that have stayed around forever, they have a hook. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, that has a hook. You can sum it up in one sentence and you know immediately the kind of story it is. So a commercial hook is something that has that quick summary and that immediately has an identifiable audience who's going to love it, who has, it's not, a quiet bedtime story does not have a commercial hook. It doesn't mean it's a bad book and it doesn't mean it won't get published. It just means it's going to take a while to find an audience and to build momentum. A commercial hook is something that the sales team of the publisher can go into the bookstore and give them the 1-sentence synopsis, and the book buyer goes, I get it, I want 10 copies, So that's a commercial hook. And again, if you, I would go, a great way to find the hooks of stories is to look at the inside jacket flap, because the editors usually write that and they are pulling out the story's hook and putting it in that little blurb. It's either the inside or the back cover. so that you pick up the book, you read the blurb, and you immediately know whether this is the kind of story you're going to want to read. And so read some of those inside jacket flaps, especially for books that are commercially successful, that are on the bestseller lists. And you'll start to get kind of a sense of what the hooks are. All right, where are we time-wise? My goodness, it's 6 minutes over, and some of you are still here. All right, I'm going to answer about 3 more questions, and then I think my my voice is going to give out. So I apologize if those of you, for those of you who maybe didn't get a question answered, we'll do it again. Okay, let's see. Susan asks, how do you know if the picture book you wrote would be better as a chapter book, or could it be both? I think chapter books usually, whenever I see a picture book and a manuscript that's a picture book, and I think, you know what, this should be a chapter book. It's either the author is trying to cram too much into the picture book as far as plot goes, or the picture book story just feels, it's like, I want to know more about this character, and there's not enough in the story because you're limited by the words. So, you know, you should be able to sum up the plot of a picture book in 1 sentence. If you can't, it's too complex. So you can either simplify it or you can make it a longer story. And also, if it's a story that would be meaningful to kids who are older than the picture book audience. Remember, kids who read picture books are at a different phase of their life than kids who read chapter books. Chapter book readers are generally, there is some overlap, but we're getting into 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade with chapter books. Your average picture book reader is about 5 years old. So they're dealing with different problems. They see the world in a very different way. They have a different sense of humor. They care about different things. So a lot of that thinking goes into whether it should be picture book, chapter book. If you decide to make it a chapter book, you might have to age your character up a year or 2 to make the character relevant to chapter book readers. So it really depends a lot on how complex your story is and whether the character needs more space to really explore whatever it is they're doing in the book. Also, if you feel the need to have a subplot, that's a chapter book. So if there's another character you want to develop, another relationship, if there's an internal problem your protagonist is got to solve before they can solve this external problem, that's a chapter book. It's more complex. So these are just some questions you need to ask about what you're writing to decide where it best fits. Okay. No. 2 more. I'm just going to close my eyes and point. Let's try to find someone I haven't. What's a good resource about doing children's workbooks? Any tips off the cuff? Ramona, I'm not sure what you mean by workbook. Do you mean activity book? Something like that? You can always, if you're still here, Ramona, put it in the chat box, specify to me a little more specifically. I don't, off the top of my head, have a good resource for you. I would just say study the ones out there that you can find and base it off of that. But I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. Okay, last one. Well, I'll combine 2 here. So Anonymous asks, do you find that agents stick to word count and turn down anything not the magical number? No, quite the opposite. In fact, I've asked this question to editors and agents specifically. To a person, they have said to me, we don't look at word count. We read the manuscript. And then we decide if it's too long. So, you know, you got to know the categories and the audience you're writing for. If you write a 3,000 word picture book, it's not going to work because it's too long, because you're dealing with 5-year-olds who are not going to sit still for a 3,000 word picture book. And you can't have 3,000 words in a 32-page format and still have room for the illustrations. So there are some sort of obvious cutoffs there. But if your picture book is 800 words instead of 500, or 1,000 words instead of 500, and you need every single word in that story, that's fine. It's the same way with older fiction. So write the book the best way you know how. Be conscious of the market. If you have a young adult novel that's only 50 pages long, that's going to be hard to sell, because first of all, it's going to get lost on the shelf next to the thicker novels. It's going to be hard to call it a novel, so you got to use some common sense. But I wouldn't sweat the 100 words here and there, or 1,000 words here and there for a novel, or a couple thousand. Really write the book the best way you can. Okay, and finally, Susan asks, any advice on how to streamline the search in finding the perfect editor? Go to manuscript wish list. Go to, you want to find, you have your favorite books, okay, and that are inspiring you, that you love. Who's the editor at those publishing houses? Very often, authors thank their editors in the acknowledgments. Okay, so look at that. You can go on publishers' websites, see the list of editors. Go to those editors' Facebook pages, Twitter feeds. You got to start following them and seeing who they are. And what you want to do is find editors who love the kind of thing you're writing, obviously, who also have published authors that you love, who you feel would sort of get you and get your sensibility. So it is sort of a detective game. And you want to, if you go to writing conferences, you're going to listen to what the editors have to say, get a sense of their personality. But a lot of editors now have Facebook pages, Twitter feeds. They talk a lot about what they like, what they're reading. And that's what you want to start paying attention to. So it does take some digging. But start with the books you love and go to manuscript wish lists and start looking at, put in some keywords there and see what editors are looking for. Also, the other thing that you should definitely subscribe to is Children's Bookshelf from Publishers Weekly. It's a free, I'm putting this in the chat box, and most of you already know about this. It's a free newsletter, comes out twice a week. You go to Publishers. I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. Publishersweekly.com. There, I just put in the chat box. You could go to publishersweekly.com, sign up for it. It's an e-newsletter, but it's a roundup of the publishing news as it applies to Kidlit. But there's a whole list of deals that have been made that week, or within the last few weeks, that they list. And it'll say, this editor at this publisher bought this book, which is about this. And so you could start to get a sense of what different editors are buying and what they're looking for. And you will also get names of different publishers. And they're not just the big publishers that are listed there. Smaller publishers get listed too. So that's another good way to start keeping track of what editors are doing. And also it'll list the agent who represented the author and the illustrator. So you can start gathering your list of potential agents that way as well. Okay, that's all my advice for tonight. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Sorry to those of you whose questions didn't get answered. I apologize for not being able to talk faster. But thank you all so much. You'll get the replay tomorrow. We'll have all these links under it. And please come to my social next in 2 weeks, April 19th. If you want to know anything about self-publishing, we're going to have, and also she's got some great marketing advice, which will apply to everyone. So be sure to be here for that. And we have great guests already scheduled in May, some really good ones. So I hope to see you all at the next Kidlit social. Good night, everybody.